Okay, it's a couple minutes past 6:30, so time to get the meeting started. So I'll ask that the roll call be read, please.
Weibel? Bergson? Harper? Petrie?
Present.
Schrader? Shore? And Esri.
Here. And I'll note that Mr. Schrader was going to try and make it, but he basically 5 minutes before 6:30 just texted me he got done loading a semi of beans. So by the time he would have made it up here, probably wouldn't have been worth it. So
Well, listen, you have a record to go for. The facility meeting was 8 minutes. You gotta beat that.
okay.
Buddy.
Well, depends on if there's any questions. Susan, can you do your presentations in like one word each?
They laid a tough bar on you.
Yeah, no doubt. That sounds like it. Okay, we'll move on then to approval of agenda and addenda. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Shore, seconded by Ms. Berkson. Any additions or subtractions to be made? Corrections? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you. Move on to approval of minutes for the ELEC committee meeting held February 4th, 2016. Such a motion. Mr. Shore, seconded by Ms. Bergson. Additions or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. Public participation. Anybody wish to speak at this point in time? Okay, we will move on then to communications. Anybody from the board or have any communications that need to come forward? We will move on then to our first action item. You could say under 7 for information only. We have A, update regarding assistance to Wilbur Heights, and Ms. Susan Monty.
Hello. Well, I wanted to provide an update. We had community meetings at Wilbur Heights on February 20th and February 23rd. February 20th was Saturday, and the 23rd was a Tuesday evening, Saturday day meetings. At the Saturday meeting, we had 23 attendees. At the Tuesday evening meeting, we had 12. So that's a decent turnout for a community meeting. We discussed at the meeting the proposed, not the proposed, but the recommended improvements for drainage and Wilbur Avenue reconstruction. There were many questions about the scope of the project. There were concerns expressed generally about the phasing of Wilbur Avenue improvements first, drainage improvements first. Some of the persons that live adjacent to 3rd Street and Wallace, and near that Wallace and 3rd Street intersection, were present and expressed frustration that the phasing would take too long, and their concerns that it be moved up if possible, the 3rd Street improvements. I have some fantastic photos of flooding on 3rd Street, but after yesterday's rains, there were people waiting around in the 3rd Street out there, and there was a semi-truck, looked like half the tire was beneath water on 3rd Street. So that was a pretty good graphic to record. At the meetings, essentially the meetings were questions about ongoing frustrations with businesses and residential kind of land use conflicts, drainage patterns being adjusted by businesses as observed by residents. So there was a mix of residents and business people there at each meeting, mostly residents at each meeting. So that's some synopsis of the meetings. Essentially, we collected some questions for follow-up, which were individual types of questions concerning individual property concerns. And it was great. John Hall was able to attend both meetings, and he was able to answer some very specific questions about zoning and land use problems. Let me talk now about the survey. We sent a survey out on March 14th to 81 tax-paying landowners at Wilbur Heights subdivision, taxpayer category, and followed that with a survey to about 32 occupants living in rented or leased properties there. So our return rates, you saw a copy of the survey in your packet, and the survey included questions like, are you willing to pay your fair share if there were to be a special assessment? And you saw the special assessment described in the newsletter of probable amounts that might be representative of the types of fair share amounts we were talking about. So the survey was sent out to 81 taxpayers and 32 occupants, and we received a 30% return rate from the taxpayer, landowner, businesses and industry and residences. 16, excuse me, let me get this. There were 30% return rate. 13 of those returns from taxpayers indicated no, they would not be willing to pay their fair share as represented in the survey, the example amounts. 4 indicated no, they would not want to pay their fair share or be willing to pay their fair share, but alternate amounts, generally lesser, were okay. 7 respondents indicated yes, they'd be willing to pay the fair share indicated. 1 respondent indicated more information requested before they could make a decision. So that's sort of the way it went with the responses received so far from the taxpayers. The occupants, 32 occupants, fewer responses were received from those persons and generally less supportive of a fair share, paying a fair share amount. Don't have the numbers to share with you tonight. We are still getting responses trickling in. I'd be happy to prepare a one-page summary of these responses and make it available to each of you. So that's a summary of these community meetings, the survey. John Hall and I have been talking about next steps and preparing a timeline for different futures, and I've begun work on that. I've prepared some information and have information available from IDOT about that source of funding. I'm collecting information about potential CDAP, Community Development Assistance Program grant application needs. I'm collecting information from our engineer to receive a revised cost proposal for Phase 1 that might include 3rd Street improvements, as was discussed at one of our community meetings. So all of that information is sort of flowing in play, and we think that this is April. By the May meeting, we would need to have a recommendation from ELUC with regard to how you would want to proceed with as a strategy forward. So we would be willing to prepare and provide to you different timelines, different strategy, maybe one strategy and an alternate strategy for moving forward, and you could have that information and give us some advice about how you'd like to move forward. Timelines are pretty tight if we're even considering feasibility of a Community Development Assistance Program grant. So that's why this can't wait much longer than at our May ELUC meeting. We would have to request your input about directions forward at that point.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Questions, Ms. Petrie?
Susan, I have several. I'll start with your report on what you have so far on the results of the survey. And when you send us a summary, I'd be very interested in the breakdown under the taxpayer category, especially in relationship to the no's and the size of the businesses that are saying no, and some, if possible, analysis of what kind of equipment they're running over those roads. I have a hypothesis of what the correlation will be, but I won't put that out right now. John, stop. Okay, all right. Second is, I sent to you and John, or maybe you had already received it, about grant writing workshops that are upcoming. And when I looked at the list, some of it looked like it was a potential for this project. There's no guarantees, obviously, and as I said in some of the descriptors, who knows if the money will come down the budget pipe from the state, but at least going and talking to people just maybe enhances remembering us.
Thank you.
down
I had
here.
also requested to be put on that mailing list, so I'm already signed up for that
Okay,
workshop.
great. Yeah, that's great. And there's one fairly soon that's
Right.
in Springfield. That's terrific. Okay, the last question is, can you or John or both of you give me a quick and dirty lesson on the levies for township roads? I got some conflicting information, and I won't mention the information because then that'll poison the well. I just want to hear how this happens, and specifically Summer Township. Is Summer Township at the maximum of their possible levy? Because I don't see in your listing here of potential funding sources anything about that levy and if it could be increased.
Well, we, as you recall, for Wilbur Avenue reconstruction, are talking about reconstruction and a jurisdictional transfer.
Yeah, I
from-
know.
Yeah,
But if you go over to the other streets, then it falls
yeah.
into,
I don't have the information about that. John, was it discussed in any of the meetings you attended during 2014 or 2015? We'd be
Okay.
happy to get that for you.
that would be great. Because I think all the townships are under P-TEL, so I don't think it's an easy thing to accomplish, but I need definite information. Thanks.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Harper?
Yeah, Susan, of course, my big concern, did they find a drainage outlet or a way to get rid of that water? Because you can't do much of those roads till you get rid of the water, so.
Right. The first phase, Phase 1A, involves drainage improvements adjacent to Wilbur Avenue. And then Phase 1B is improvements to Wilbur Avenue, reconstruction of it. And then Phase 2 is to improve the drainage outlet. Now, there's two alternatives that are possible. The engineer has recommended two alternatives. One, in the event we can't work with the railroad. Okay.
Other questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll move on then to B, an update regarding land resource management conditions relevant to the Champaign County Land Resource Management Plan, and that would be Ms. Monty again.
Okay, there are three conditions that were standing out as relevant to the land resource management conditions in Champaign County. One, of course, is the sole source aquifer designation of Muhammad Aquifer. That was pretty benchmark, major kind of news during 2015. So information about that is described here in your memorandum, just summarizing that phenomenon, that effort. The second one is the consent decree approved by the Muhammad Aquifer Coalition and all parties. That's described here also. It's, as you know, it was contentious, and many different sides expressed their thoughts about that. In the end, it was approved, and it does provide certain protections and not others to the Muhammad Aquifer as a sole source aquifer, specifically with the MGP and PCP waste provisions. There was, as you recall, much dissatisfaction expressed about the lack of any kind of provision in this consent decree to address the remaining MGP waste in the landfill. So that's an ongoing legislative battle on a different front. Third, I needed and felt compelled to make mention of the statewide crisis with regard to collection of electronics, specifically televisions. It's just become such a burden for all local governments, including Champaign County, including the municipalities. So that situation is summarized here. I heard a little ray of good news, but it's nothing that has happened yet, so it doesn't apply to this report. So with regard to ongoing legislative efforts to fix that. Well, there is a stewardship council that is proposing changes. They should make those proposals to legislation and find a sponsor for those legislative changes being proposed, and it equalizes the costs so that local governments can get refunded any costs that they incur. I don't have a summary of that in front of me, but as soon as it becomes public and on the record, I plan to distribute that widely and try to garner the support of anyone or any entity that is interested in providing support to that. So it does allow for increased manufacturer support. It allows for using some state funds, which is hard to imagine at this point, but there is a solid waste fund that if it is not swept, some of those monies could be allocated toward fixing of this program. It involves having an oversight board and an advisory board, looking over that board. So, yeah, it's easy to share the information. I just don't have it all to describe it to you at this moment, but there are ongoing efforts to make improvements to that broken program.
Any other questions, comments on that? Okay, we will then move.
I
Go
did
ahead,
have
Susan.
one
Sorry,
final
go ahead.
thought, and that is that the upcoming residential collections that we have a contract for that you will be considering later this evening are simply that, residential collections, and that local governments, including townships, I'm getting calls from townships in the county, have accumulated televisions from sides of the road. And so we're presently trying to negotiate a deal with the contractor to do a separate collection for local governments.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay.
Okay, if that didn't bring up any other questions, we will then move to the first of the two addendums for C, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency Non-Compliance Advisory Letter received April 4th, 2016, and that's Mr. John Hall.
You may have noticed in the January monthly report that we had our EPA audit of our MS4 stormwater program in January, late January. The EPA was considerate enough to wait until we had adopted the new ordinance, and that was a good thing because that was a big item on our list. And then on March 24th, or April 4th, sorry, I received the written report. And there was one apparent violation regarding posting of the notice of intent in the annual report on the website. It had not been posted. It's been a part of our notice of intent from day one. It was seen by me, as not being as important as other steps. My opinion changed when I got the non-advisory letter, and IT was gracious enough to have that report posted on the website by the afternoon of April 5th. And so we've taken care of the apparent violation. Yeah, an email went out to EPA the same day. So the other recommendations, the 6 other recommendations, are things that suggest to me that we may have to have a year of focus on the MS4 program in our planning contract, or somehow provide an unusual boost in FY17. Although I plan to discuss this a little more with our EPA inspector to see if they're really wanting these things done in a year, or if they're still open to stretching it out so that, you know, we can do other things as well as bring the MS4 program up to full compliance. Probably the most important thing there are the illicit discharges into the ditches and sewers, which again, one bright spot in the noncompliance was no mention about our approach of focusing just on the MS4 jurisdictional area. To me, that says we can continue doing that. Now, one question I'll be bringing to ELUC is on illicit discharges. Do we also want to try to focus that just on the MS4 area, or is that something that you might want to expand countywide? I would not ask you that until I can explain what that means in terms of workload, and I can't explain that yet. But that will be an important decision within at least the next year. So anyhow, I think we're off the hook for now, but the burner's turned up a little bit on these remaining items.
Thank you, John. Questions? See, oh, Ms. Petrie.
Do you have any sense at all as to how large the problem of illicit discharge are throughout the county?
Interpreted broadly as in even septic systems that may not be working properly, I suspect it's pretty large.
Other questions? And seeing none, we will then move on to the next number, 8. Items to receive and place on file by ELEC committee to allow for 30-day review period. We have A, the proposed minor amendments to the Champaign County Land Resource Management Plan. And that, I believe, was Ms. Monty again.
Excuse me. The minor amendments include two things. One, an amendment to, a minor amendment to Volume 1 to include information about the sole source aquifer designation and describing the mapped areas associated with that sole source aquifer in Champaign County. There's 3 different types of mapped areas, and those are described here. The sole source aquifer area itself, the aquifer service area, the area served by the entire population served by the aquifer, and then the project review area, which is the area for which EPA must review proposed federally funded projects. So that map shown as attachment indicates, I guess it wasn't included here, was it? I guess it was for the first memorandum. There's a map there that shows those different areas. And there is a minor amendment proposed to the LRMP maps to include updated municipal boundaries and adjusted ETJ boundaries, extraterritorial jurisdiction boundaries. And those adjusted ETJ boundaries would be simply a reflection of any further annexations that may have occurred. This will be held for a month, and I don't have the map here to distribute to you tonight, but it should be available.
Questions, Ms. Petrie?
Well, I have a question for Mr. Weibel, who is our resident geologist. Are the boundaries of the aquifer map accurate, or are they also changing some of the other issues, or nobody feels that it's a solid description of it?
Well, depends how you define the boundary. And,
Well, I'm looking at the map here.
well, I don't know how the boundary is defined on the map, so there's no explanation.
These are surface boundaries.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the Mohammed Sole Aquifer area, Sole Source Aquifer area. I'm not sure how that's defined. Actually, it's defined by the service. It does. I agree. Okay, it says the blue lines is the project review area boundary, but the aquifer goes into Indiana, so apparently they decided not to include a narrow strip of Illinois, And there's no reason why it could have gone into Indiana too, since it's a federal designation. So actually, I can't explain the boundaries on this map, but on the other hand, I've not been involved with the sole source aquifer project per se.
Okay.
I did work on this project many years ago. In fact, part of this map is probably from my handwriting somewhere.
Well, then, just a follow-up question, is there a high enough comfort level that it should then become part of the official record? In this 30-day review and then potentially
I think
coming
it's
back?
certainly, well, I can't present a better map.
Yeah, this is the official map online as provided by the Illinois EPA. In this 30-day period, I could double-check with the Illinois EPA to see if there's a different map, but I believe this would be pretty much the map.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions at this point in time on this subject? And seeing none, we'll then move on to 9. Thank you, Susan. Items to be approved by ELUC. First A, Recreation and Entertainment License, Eastern Illinois Abate Incorporated for live bands and motorcycle rodeo, Rolling Hills Campground, 3151A, County Road 2800 East, Penfield for June 3rd through 5th, 2016. It's wrong on the agenda. It says 2015. Moved by Mr. Weibel, seconded by Mr. Harper. Questions or comments on this? It's been done several years in a row, I know. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes.
Point of information, I'm wondering, do we have to vote on the 30-day review period, or is that automatic? The previous
Oh, I'm
item?
sorry.
There's no,
Yes, well, that's just going for review yet.
or
There's no-
do we actually have action, does this committee have to take action on that?
We
or is
just
that-
receive
Or is
them
that
right now.
automatic?
We receive them right
It's automatic,
now.
okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mr. Weibel, for checking me on that. You said it, and yeah, I started questioning myself. Thanks. Okay, so we've approved the item A, the abate license. Now we move on to item B, under 9, approve reallocation of hours from general planning to Wilbur Heights Assistance in the 2016 RPC planning contract. Ms. Monty.
Yes, this is a reallocation of already budgeted hours from general planning service request to the Wilbur Heights assistance item. Our goal, as I alluded to, was to provide ELUC with sufficient information at its May meeting to or provide direction with regard to a strategy forward with regard to Wilbur Heights. I would be using those hours to collaborate with John Hall and other stakeholders to collect that information and present it to you in May.
Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Ms. Berkson. Is there comments, questions on that? Ms. Petrie?
I need a reminder. I thought when we set up this contract, the purpose of setting up the general planning service request area was to give flexibility within the contract, so you wouldn't have to come back and ask for adjustments until you ran out of those particular hours. Appreciate knowing that there's going to be some changes, but can somebody remind me, am I remembering correctly on why we did that? Because part of the delay for you to move forward was the factor that you had to come to us, ask to move the hours, and then we usually approve, but it's still a procedural delay, and I thought we were trying to help you by truncating some of that procedural delay. Can somebody help me? Remember?
I recall that type of discussion. Just for your information, I have kept working on this, assuming that this would be approved. using those hours.
Yeah, but that's not my point.
Yeah.
I guess I'll jump in. I guess tend to agree with you, Ms. Petrie, that was somewhat that
That was the- I
was
thought
basically
that was the
the
intent.
reasoning. Ms. Berkson, did you have a microphone, please? Just,
I don't think she's coming to us with, so much with advance things, since she's already doing it, but just giving us specific information for how that general fund is being used, which I think we should have. I think that's
Well,
a
that
very
was my,
good idea.
that was my point, but the way it's set up, it's a vote-on issue, and I thought it was built in to be flexible for her.
It is set up as a vote.
Maybe we could go
but-
back on the record and just
Yeah.
double-check on it.
I don't suppose we're going to hurt anything to go ahead and vote on
No,
it
it
by any
won't.
means, but I think I tend to agree with you, Ms. Petrie, that is but it is appreciated to let us know too. So
Yes, absolutely.
that part's fine, but I do tend to agree that maybe we should go back and look just to make sure. Mr. Shore,
I mean, I guess part of the intent is to make sure that when we go back and look, we can see what those general hours were used for, and if they get allocated out like this.
Well, that can be reported.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, if the committee's fine with that, I mean, maybe in the future, we could just get a report on that. Put it under for information only or something.
sounds good. We do have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. All there's no other questions or comments. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. We will then move to the second addendum. Under 9C, Recreation and Entertainment License. Recreation Entertainment License for the Champaign County Fair Association, Annual License for Champaign County Fairgrounds, 1302 North Kohler Avenue, Urbana. Have the attached calendar of the anticipated events, including the Champaign County Fair, which runs July 22nd through July 30th, 2016. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Harper, seconded by Ms. Berkson. Thank you. Comments, questions on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. Then move on to 10, items to be recommended to the county board. We have A, zoning case 824-AM-15, request by petitioner Dustin Ealer, doing business as Ealer Brothers Company, to amend the zoning map to change the zoning district designation from the AG1 Agriculture Zoning District to the B1 Rural Trade Center on a 1.4 acre tract to allow for the expansion of an existing farm chemicals and fertilizer sales business, including storage and mixing of blended fertilizer in the northeast quarter of Section 19 of Ogden Township, Township 20 North, Range 11 East of the 3rd Principal Meridian on the east side of the existing Ealer Brothers facility located at 2475 County Road 2100 North, Thomasboro. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Harper, seconded by Ms. Berkson. And I will note that we have Mr. Dustin Ealer in the audience. He's here if we have questions, I believe, to answer them, and open it for questions and comments. Anyone with a question or a comment? Okay. Oh, Mr. Shore.
Just assuming that because there's no comments, we're about to pass this unanimously, just because of the ZBA 6-1 vote and the Lisa rating, I'd ask that it not be on consent.
Have no problem with that. I guess a few comments. I know Mr. Hall made during our agenda meeting. The one vote against wasn't a vote against the actual business or anything. It was more, my understanding, maybe just the location being next to a stream, a concern about that. So it wasn't truly against the principles. Mr. Hall?
Well, actually, it was about using the map amendment process rather than say, a site-specific special use permit. So, but there was no problems, even with this location, but just in general.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had that wrong. Mr. Harper?
To ask Sam, why wouldn't, if zoning approves it and we approve it, why shouldn't it just go right through? I mean, why does it need to be taken off consent agenda?
I'll just say that it's any one of us, one person's prerogative, the way our board rules are set. And I can let, if Mr. Shore cares to say anything more, but
I mean, I'm fully supportive of it. I just think, given, it's, most of the time we get a unanimous thing from the ZBA, and given the rating, I just think it's important to highlight that for the other board members.
yeah, and that's fine. Yeah, Ms. Petrie?
Well, I concur, and I would have done, I was going to make it, so I concur with that.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem for the full board to discuss it if we wish. I mean, oftentimes at the meetings too, it's pulled off the consent here, you could say, even if we do pass it unanimously, but there's oftentimes isn't a whole lot of discussion at the full board, so. But like I say, it's, any one of us is prerogative, one person, so. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Hall?
I would just like the committee to be aware that, we recently updated the LISA system, and the LISA system, in my view, worked perfectly in this instance, gave it a very high rating. On the other hand, I don't have a problem myself with this high rating because we all know this is to support agriculture, and I would rather have the board recognize that when it occurs and accept the fact that, yes, that's the way our LISA system works, rather than try to devise some way to make the LISA system recognize that and then take the chance that it wouldn't work correctly in any given instance. I'm not aware of any LISA system that makes provisions for facilities like this, which can be a fault. But again, as long as the board is adult enough to deal with that and recognize that, yeah, we can handle that. We can make that allowance in this case, rather than take the risk that it wouldn't work, in some other way. But again, the more often this comes up, the more insight you'll have into whether we really should try to revise the LISA to incorporate something like that into it. But I don't know of any place where we could turn for a model. But anyhow, that's why I'm glad it's not on the consent agenda, so people get a chance. It's brought to their attention, and they're made aware of it.
Any other questions, comments? At this point in time, do you wish to speak at all at this point in time after hearing our discussion? Okay, thank you. Well, I guess then we are ready to vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes unanimously, but we will keep it off the consent agenda, not a problem. We'll then move on to 10B, the intergovernmental cost share agreement for the 2016 countywide residential electronics collection, as referenced by Ms. Monty earlier.
Yes, this reflects the budget amendment that was passed in February. You'll notice the amounts that are in this cost share agreement are higher than ever. And since the February meeting, I've sent out informational letters and contribution request letters to all communities in the county to participate in the event we need this next year. Again, it's my hope that the program is fixed prior to next year, but just FYI, other communities have been asked to contribute if they plan to participate next year in the event these funds still remain.
Mr. Weibel. Moved by Mr. Weibel, is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Shore. Yes, Mr. Weibel.
Susan, do the numbers in here parallel the numbers from the Finance Committee?
They're exactly
Okay,
what
thank
was
you.
discussed. It's a rate of $2,500 per semi with 6 to 8 semis per event for 2 events, plus traffic patrol costs.
Ms. Petrie?
I need to be reminded why the amount for the county is, from my reading, disproportionately high related to probably how much the county residents, which are so much lower than either Champaign or Urbana, in generating recyclable items. So can you remind me how these figures were arrived at?
These figures are proportionate to population, with the population of Champaign, City of Champaign, and City of Urbana and Village of Savoy proportionately represented. The county share covers other municipalities, villages in the county that don't participate in this partnership. That's why I sent letters out to all of the remaining communities to say, this is the last year we're going to do this. We've never had these kind of rates before. So, yeah. So it's forewarning to them that we can't continue to do this. So that's what happened.
Other comments, questions on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
But I do request that this also not go on
Okay,
the agenda, so the rest of the
yeah.
board get the chance to
And
see the
that,
expenses. Yeah,
that's fine.
and appreciate it. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for the work, Susan.
And then we move on to C, which is related, the agreement between the contractor, the coordinator, and the host site for the 2016 countywide residential electronics collection. Do we have a motion? Moved by Mr. Weibel, seconded by Ms. Berkson. I think that's probably fairly straightforward. If there's any comments or questions. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. Is that okay? I mean, just asking, is that one okay to go on consent? I mean, just being,
It's for the education.
yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to check since it's related. Since it's related, that's the only reason I asked. We will then move on to our monthly reports. We have the January and February, since we didn't have a meeting last month, of 2016 reports in front of us. Mr. Hall?
You might notice that there's a new table, or new appendix in the monthly report. You'll now start seeing when we get land disturbance erosion control permits. We will list those as they come in, and each land disturbance erosion control permit will be included in the monthly report until the site achieves final stabilization, which is much longer than what a normal zoning use permit takes. So this is a way to try to be transparent and let the EPA know that we're actually doing the things we're supposed to do. And I'm very happy to say we have not yet had a land disturbance erosion control permit. I'm sure we'll have one in the very near future, but anyhow, that will be a standard part of the monthly report.
Might be on the
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Questions, comments on the monthly reports? If I can speak. Okay, seeing none, we will receive and place those on file. Oh, sorry, Ms. Petrie, sorry, go ahead.
Am I reading this correctly? Page 63, this house cost basically 1 million?
And that is the maximum fee, so you got your maximum fee on that one.
Okay, any other questions before we do move on? Okay, we will then move on to the other business. We have the semi-annual review of closed session minutes And Brian can tell me if I'm wrong, but the way I'm reading this, it's to remain as is, the recommendation. So is there such? Moved by Mr. Weibel to keep the closed minutes closed as is, seconded by Mr. Shore. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. Chair's report, I guess the only thing would be maybe, as mentioned by Ms. Monty, be thinking about our next meeting, how we want to, now granted, we don't necessarily have kind of timelines and stuff, but maybe just be prepared to think and look at how we want to maybe move along with Wilbur Heights for our next meeting. Designation of items to be placed on consent agenda. We have the 10C, the agreement between the contractor and coordinator and host site for the electronics collection. And with that, motion to adjourn. So moved, seconded, we're adjourned. Thank you.